Great. Thank you so much, Barbara, for that kind introduction, and welcome everybody who's here. I just wanted to start this presentation off to say that I'm by no means a teaching online expert. My idea behind this presentation is to just share the things I know, have some of my colleagues who are quite tech savvy and at the forefront of teaching online practices that I've seen, also share what they know, and then have a discussion at the for the second portion of the webinar to just share what we all know. So the idea is not that this is a one-way street. The idea is that I'm going to share my ideas and thoughts and then hear from everybody so that we can really hopefully start a community here to help us all make this transition into the virtual classroom. So I mentioned earlier, but if you're coming in now, there's an interactive feature of this presentation that I want to try out with you all. If you could just go to on a second device, you can't really do it on the device that you're watching this webinar, but on the second device, if you could go to joinpd.com and enter that IMDKX code. Courtney's putting that info in the chat as well. And you should just see a copy of this presentation. Don't worry about it until I reference it again and guide you to that second device. All right, here we go. So, okay. So for the structure of this webinar, I did my best to put some estimated times. I'm gonna go through some online structures and tools that I've used in my brick and mortar classroom and highly recommend. I'm also gonna go through some online structures and tools that I've tried, but I caution against just to save you time. If you're thinking something might be a really good way to go, and I just wanna give you some heads up on things to anticipate. Then we'll go into anticipated challenges and opportunities of this abrupt transition we all find ourselves in from the brick and mortar classroom to the virtual classroom. Then finally, we'll go through a week one framework that Sarah Radke and I brainstormed together. If you're like me and just, don't know where to start, it's just a framework that maybe you can start with. And then we'll get into the discussion portion. So here we go. So online structures and tools I recommend. The first is converting textbook pages from your curriculum's online platform into PDFs that students can use on their devices. So if you look at this little infographic I made, you can first take a screenshot of the textbook page from the curriculum's website. For me, I use the MP3, so this is from the Dash. Then you take that screenshot into Notability or another app I'm sure is similar to Notability. You take the screenshot, crop it, and then you can copy paste and show different croppings of the original textbook page to give the student space to work in between the questions. Then you take that new PDF you've created, which is sort of like a worksheet version of the textbook page, export it, export that Notability note as a PDF and attach it to an assignment in Schoology. Okay, this is now how the kids or the students can access it from home. They are experts at this, so you don't have to worry really much about explaining it to them. But once you've posted that PDF to your Schoology assignment or whatever LMS system you use, at Town we use Schoology, they can then bring it into their Notability or similar app, fill in their work. You can see an example of that in that most right picture. That's an example of a student who worked out her thinking using Notability in between those spaces I created. And then once they're done with their work, they can submit their finished work back to Schoology. You can then in Schoology view their work and comment on it. So like that green writing where I wrote here, that's my, I just wrote it really big for the purposes of this webinar, but that's an example of my writing on top of students' work that can then be shared with that student. So some pros and cons of this whole image here, from the screenshot of the textbook to the feedback to the student. It's completely digital and online. The other pro is that students can then look at your feedback, rework some of the things that you commented on, and make a second submission. So I've utilized that a lot. And again, the students do it like second nature. Cons to this is that it can be a bit time consuming to convert your textbook pages to those PDFs. At the end, if you're interested, I have up through Moving Straight Ahead and CMP3. It can be time consuming to create that worksheet. And it also might take some of your synchronous class time to manage submissions. Sometimes kids submit their PDF to the wrong assignment. So that's a downside. Okay. Next, another tool, I guess you could call it, is sharing your iPad screen live during a synchronous class as a shared screen on Zoom. So the easiest way is actually not how Zoom would lead you to believe. At least I've had trouble. So the steps on this slide show you how to take your iPad screen. So for example, here's me in Notability right now. You know, I'll be like using my iPad screen as a whiteboard and have it show in the Zoom chat. So I don't want to waste too much time going through the step-by-step. You'll get these slides later. But that is something you can do. These steps that actually work require a cable that can connect your iPad to your laptop, like you see in that first picture. I actually needed a little adapter because my computer doesn't have a USB connecting point. So that's a con. If you don't have that, things are, you know, difficult to obtain at this moment. But if you can connect your iPad to your laptop, that's a great way. What else did I want to say about that? It's a smooth way of writing, and it's better than what I find in that these digital synchronous time video conference platforms allow for. It's smoother than that. One of the downsides is that you can't physically point to things like you would a whiteboard at school. So you have to get a little bit creative, maybe use the highlight tool in Notability to say, okay, I'm talking about this. And as you're saying this, you're highlighting so the kids see something, some movement around what you're talking about. And I just want to give a shout out to Ryan Vereen and Marjorie Vereen, who work at the town school and came up with this. They're fantastic people. And they are sharing great shots of nature on Instagram these days. Okay, the next one is, I've mentioned this already, but Notability and an Apple Pencil. So Notability is what my school already pushes out to all the kids' iPads. And again, you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, a zoomed in version of what I showed earlier. This is a student's work written in Notability on top of a PDF I created. And this is so typical of how kids use Notability for my assignments. She has pictures, she has written words, she has typed words, she has highlighted words. It's one of those things that is not just a translation of writing on paper to tech, but it's enhancement, because you can copy paste, you know, those little bags and coins she drew, she can just copy paste and not have to redraw it every time. The Apple Pencil, I use it with Notability. And I just want to say, like, if your kids use Notability a lot and you don't, or if your kids use some kinds of app at school to take notes on, whatever they do to take notes on, it's typically not like a Google doc typing. They're more savvy than us, you know, in terms of using what's available today to take notes. So whatever they're using, get familiar with it. Once I resisted for probably like 2 years, but once I actually did force myself to use Notability and use the Apple Pencil rather than my finger, I'm not exaggerating when I say it transformed my teaching. The Apple Pencil, I'm not paid by Apple, but I think it's great. It's something like $80 or $100, which is expensive, but like I said, it can really transform how you create materials for your students. There's also other brands of similar tools, but just be really careful reading reviews and things, because some of them are not great or clunky, or they're not as like point to point smooth like Apple Pencil is with Notability. All right, moving on. Okay, the next tool I wanted to share with you all is called PearDeck. It's an add-on to Google Slides that I am using now, and that is what that join PD and the code is all about. So PearDeck takes a Google Slide presentation that you can give to your kids during synchronous time, and the PearDeck add-on has methods of having the kids give instant feedback in many ways. So some things you can do with these add-ons is you can quickly gauge how comfortable students are with the pace of a presentation. You can say, again, in synchronous time, hey guys, move your blue dot to how you feel right now. And you can look and see if all the blue dots are clumped around, I'm keeping up, you can keep going. If all the dots are clumped around, this is going too fast, I'm confused, you can immediately pivot during that synchro time and meet them where they are. You can also gather information really quickly in the moment with a multiple choice category. You can have, I'm looking at number 3 now, you can have students work on a given problem while you watch what they're doing. So this is the closest thing I've been able to find to walking around the classroom and watching what they're writing on their paper, is a PearDeck slide that I'll demo with you all. And in the layout, you can look at student by student live. What they're writing at home will show up under their name on your screen. The 4th one, you can also pause the Google presentation you're doing synchronously and say, okay, right now, take 10 seconds and choose, do you want to be called on? Do you have an idea, but you're not sure, but you're willing to be called on, or do you really not want to be called on right now? Also, what I'm going to use at the end of this presentation is a PearDeck slide where the kids can take 1 minute, write down one thing what's the most important thing you learned today? And again, that's something that is really helpful for us with this distance between us and our students. So well, let's demo it. If you have that second device and you signed into joinpd.com, on your second device, you should be able to respond to the slide that's up now. And once I get kind of a critical mass, I'll show you what you would then do with that information. All right, so we got 37 people, let's go with that. So now I think you all can see on your screens show responses. So I can also lock screens. I also have this timer. I can say, okay, you got 30 seconds, you got 3 minutes, but maybe a way to do a quiz or something. So then I can show responses, and this is an overlay of what you all are doing right now. I can also do a grid. I think the more people that are joined on, the more the slower it will be, but with 20 kids, it should be very fast. And in this, I purposefully set up my PearDeck so that you all could be anonymous and you didn't have to join PearDeck, but there is another way to implement this in which you'd have to put your name, and every one of these screens would be associated with a student. But you have to be mindful, everyone can see what I'm doing, I can also list it, so that would be person by person. But obviously for a slide like this, the overlay option is best. There's also ways to have it in a separate window so the kids can't see, separate device so the kids can't see. All right, let's try the next slide. This is another thing that we can do is right now we can find out of the people on this webinar who are on that second device. And also I think you can join PD.com now if you want to, if you weren't doing it before, but now you want to do it. I think you can join in the middle. So let's see, we got 31. So I'm just learning, like, be honest here. Who's using problem-based math, who's not using problem-based math, and who's maybe a mixture. Myself, I'm probably like, trying to use problem-based math, but sometimes I do a little more traditional. So here we go with that. Yeah, okay. So we're pretty evenly spread across the whole spectrum. That's interesting. All right, so now I'll hide responses. This one, just draw, but I wanted to show this slide because if I had set this up differently and I could have a math problem, then this is the one where I'm talking about that I think could be really powerful, where the kids can write on their device their work, their thoughts, how they're solving it. And then I can go to this, that's the overlay, I believe. Oh no, that's the list. The overlay is gonna be a mess for something like this. But if I wanna see, oh, 1 + 1 = 2, this kid gets it. Oh, someone's drawing a car, they are out to lunch. So it's just, this isn't how I would use it in my class. This is, I would probably want to use this somehow to put a math problem up there, see how the kids are working on it live. Again, this is like walking around your classroom and looking at their notebook or looking at their Notability iPad, whatever. And what else did I want to say about this? Oh, what could be limiting is that it depends on, how facile they are with their device, how they would write on this screen. I don't know that yet. So that's something that, we can figure out as we go. But as you'll see, like, the default is a pretty thick line. So it would be hard to kind of show the more detailed work I was showing earlier with that student example. All right, hide that. Here's just one more. We'll do it really quick. Do you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts out loud right now? This is one I wouldn't display to the whole class, but I'll display to you now so you can see what it looks like. I don't know what the grid would look like. Oh, then I can see kid by kid. But you can take a poll live, like who thinks it's gonna, or who thinks this is gonna happen. It's another good feature. Okay. So that's the bulk of that's all the PearDeck slides I tried. But if you go to the bottom link, that's where I found the PearDeck information, and there's tutorials and you can go crazy with it. So these are two websites that I found, you know, as teachers right now, I'm sure when you try and do a little bit of research about how to transition to online teaching, it can be overwhelming. Everybody's got an idea. You don't know if they're trying to sell you something. Sometimes you know they're trying to sell you something. It's very hard to filter through. So I think that's why this community of people on this webinar is so important, because we can really help each other come up with what are the tools that we're finding are the most useful. How can we help each other use those tools? And so I just wanted to share these two websites. The top one is this woman, Allison Yang, and she's like in her third week of teaching online, but she's blogging about her experience in a way that I found really helpful. And she also has shared some really just powerful infographics for teachers. Like literally, you might have seen one that's just called "Do This, Don't Do This," and it's just simple. You know, we all need this to be kind of as simple and easy as possible for ourselves. Okay, some online structures and tools I've used that I caution against. The first is Khan Academy. I kind of laughed to myself because, you know, Khan Academy is not the natural partner of problem-based learning. But I've tried to use it to check in on benchmarks and things like that. By the way, I want to say first too that this list is not to say these things are bad, don't use them. This list is to say, here are things that I thought would be really, really useful quickly and actually had some speed bumps and hurdles. So I just want to give you a heads up to those hurdles so that you start using them more intelligently than I did. So one of the things about Khan Academy is that the kids will, you know, if they get something wrong, Khan Academy says, ding, why don't you use this hint? And the hints or the videos, they're very algorithm based, they're very traditional. And in my classroom, and I assume in many of your classrooms, you'll find kids say, well, I used the hint on Khan Academy and it was telling me to line it up like this and then multiply this by this and move this. And we didn't do that in class. And I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, because I want you to tap into how you organically come into this problem and use your natural thinking to get to the answer, not go from the introduction of the problem to the algorithm, which is, again, like sort of the antithesis of problem-based learning. So Khan Academy does have a place that's useful. I'm not trying to hate on them, but you just have to know that, maybe say something to your kids about the hints. Google Form assessments, again, something that I caution you against doing is taking a paper assessment you designed for paper assessment and trying to translate it directly into a Google Form assessment. I tried it. I tried it lots of times. The kids got really frustrated because one, they weren't used to it mid-year. Two, they had trouble showing their work on the Google Form assessment when they were used to being able to explain however they wanted on paper to me. The Google Form assessment was much more finicky about its auto-correcting. You know, if I put that the answer is 2x and then they put the answer is 2 times x and got it wrong, that's a moment where a kid can really get frustrated in a way where it's hard to win them back in. It's hard to get them back buying in, like, no, you're understanding this. Don't listen to the Google Form red X that says wrong. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Flubberoo is a Google Sheets add-on. I'm realizing I'm very behind schedule, so I apologize if our live discussion isn't as robust as I want. but I do want to make sure I get through all this. So I'll just mention Flubberoo and what's the one on the bottom there? Schoology quizzes and assessments are also similar to Google Form. I'm sorry, Flubberoo and the Schoology assessments I had similar difficulties with that I had with Google Form assessments. Okay, so this next slide is about online assessments for learning. So the next chunk of the presentation is about opportunities and challenges with this abrupt transition. And I think it's important, as I was making this presentation, I realized like we can focus on all the challenges and all the things we lose by making this transition, but operating in that headspace is not going to help us make the most out of our new classroom. So I'm really just focusing on the opportunities. So, well, all right. So I'll just say that there is also creating again, it's kind of about that, like not translating paper assessments directly into online assessments, because just the design is not the same and it's just going to be clunky. But we can utilize online assessments as a learning tool, and Jan is really great at that. I'm not sure where she went, but it's a way to have kids get instant feedback and then revise what they didn't know. It's a way to kind of close the gap between where they are and where they want to be with understanding the information. You can have them have unlimited attempts at the online assessment so that they're constantly trying to figure out what they got wrong. You can, unlike paper assessments, you can include video, audio, images. So again, yeah, it's just all about not translating paper to digital. Utilize digital and design the assessment around that. Okay. So another opportunity is, well, now I'm just sort of listing out the 4 major opportunities I see. We can use this virtual classroom as a whole new approach to education, not a one-to-one translation of the brick and mortar classroom. So for example, I have these 2 little graphics. The top graphic, this is how it is when you're in a 50-minute session in the brick and mortar classroom, facilitating group work in problem-based learning. You're kind of monitoring maybe 5 groups of 4 kids at once. You're trying to drop questions that push their learning. You're trying to implement strategies to push them forward while you walk to the next group and then circle back. And it can be quite stressful, and it's its own skill that I've been working on. I'm sure all of you have been working on. But now we can utilize, I'm sorry. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Okay. So now we can utilize this new virtual classroom in a way where I laid out in the second graphic. So we can have the students be collaborating in their own time as a group of 4, and they can, each group can create some online representation or app or website, whatever, to collaborate, because they're in 4 separate spaces. So they're gonna be forced to do that. Maybe it's just a screencast of their conversation in a chat room on Google Meet, whatever it is. But now as the teacher, over time, not limited to that 50 minutes, but say from Monday synchro class to Tuesday synchro class, or Monday synchro class to Thursday synchro class, I can check in and look at each of those groups' collaborative work and comment or learn what I should do for the next synchro lesson, adjust the pace, etc. I also have this little video option, which is like maybe one group per week makes a video to share what they're doing. That is an option we have because when I was talking with Sarah about this, I was thinking as teachers, we can sometimes make one assignment, the really big one that we have to take a lot of time to go through and watch every group's video. But maybe each week it's a different group, and then you're every week watching a video, and it's more manageable for us as teachers, which, you know, is really important because I know myself as a teacher would want to like cram in learning as much as I can, optimizing everything, you know, trying to make the best virtual classroom I possibly can, when really I think the best approach is to keep it simple, work smart, and really try and keep in mind that we want to keep this doable, manageable, err on the side of that rather than overworking at this time, just so we can all, you know, manage this transition. Also, I wanted to mention that this is a whole new way for students to engage with class material. There are kids in the classroom that we usually have to monitor how they're disrupting other kids' learning. That's out the window. Now kids can really engage with the class however they want to. They can work whenever they, oh. Is this still working? Okay, sorry. Okay. So there's an enormous amount of restrictions that we have in the brick and mortar classroom that are now gone, that now allow for the students to have a freedom that I'm really excited to see how they use it. We can also slow down the process of facilitating collaborative work amongst students. That's just like the graphic I was showing before. We no longer have all these voices competing in a confined space. And now that the students have to engage online, there will be new living histories of their collaboration. I think if there's a part of me that was going into this thinking, ugh, you know, I'm gonna lose control. And, you know, if I'm giving a synchronous lesson and I can tell that a kid is texting or playing Survivio while I'm trying to do my synchronous lesson, that's gonna drive me nuts. And I think focusing on that loss of control is not a good place to have your head. Instead, focus on the tons of new ways that we can invite students in and make it attractive to engage with the math. We can allow for a lot more creativity. We can tap into their natural curiosity. And I just think it's a huge opportunity. Okay, moving on. So this next piece is the week 1 framework that can kind of get you started if you're just paralyzed with a blank slate in front of you. And I'll hand it over to Sarah Radke, who we work at that town, and she's part of Metamorphosis. So Sarah, I will unmute you. I hope.
Got it. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but like Kathleen, I'll be available after this webinar if you have questions about any specific part of this. So if you remember back at the beginning of the presentation when Kathleen sort of asked you all to vote in on where are you in terms of using problem-based learning or not on the spectrum. Kathleen and I produced this framework together, thinking about this as an opportunity, another one of the opportunities to be to engage students in math learning that could be fun and joyous at a time when so much that's going on is kind of uncontrollable. And so we were looking to problem-based learning and thinking about what kinds of rich tasks could we provide students that would simultaneously give them that space to play and explore, but also continue to cover content. If we really buy into the idea that we're not trying to reproduce a mirror copy of the brick and mortar school, then again, as teachers, we have the opportunity to get creative with the kinds of lessons that we're giving. And so I call on rich tasks, and just so that we sort of have a shared understanding of what I mean when I say that, this is coming from a lot of Joe Bowler's work and a lot of the work that we do at Meta, thinking about tasks that sort of encourage learners to think creatively and collaboratively, things that are very open-ended, that either don't have a specific X equals answer, or that invite many solutions and many strategies, so that students are encouraged to provide justification and to persist in trying to connect ideas. And so why we think that that could be a useful structure for designing lessons goes back to what Kathleen was saying, which is sort of, let's expand that 50-minute class to think about like what content could we cover across a week, and how could we start to rethink those units. So if we use the example of the mystery bags that Kathleen demoed in the beginning as how to create a PDF, we could think about what are all the mathematical content pieces in that CMP3 unit. And then how could we create a rich task that and get students to sort of explore all of that stuff through one or two problems. Now, these problems are not going to look like a textbook problem, right? These are going to be exploratory, open-ended problems. So with that in mind, the idea would be that at the beginning of the week, we're doing some of this asynchronously so that we're not wasting or taking up the time when we're all together, to sort of kind of give students our expectations as teachers, give them an overview of what the week is going to look like, and sort them into maybe if they're working in groups, what groups they'd be working in that week. And then we'd use the synchronous time together to launch the task, to get students to buy in. And the key here is, if we're doing, if part of getting students to buy in, to create questions, is to have the opportunity to talk about the problem before starting to engage, that has to be the synchronous time, right? That has to be when we're all together, so that students are posing questions, asking questions, talking to one another and to us before we launch into the work itself, right? So that's Monday. And then along with this, Kathleen was talking a lot about how can we be providing other resources that might help students practice the procedural stuff on the side, or what other daily assignments might we be doing as formative assessments of their understanding, right? And I see in the chat that someone has the question of how we're planning this as an hour total, or what the time length is here. And I think that this, on the one hand, I'll have to say the caveat is you have to kind of go by whatever the guidelines of your schools are, what they're asking you to do. But from our perspective, I think that we're thinking a little bit outside the box here in suggesting that by allowing students to sort of engage with the tasks, we're no longer thinking about time limits, or that a certain amount of time means that students are deeply engaging or not deeply engaging, right? This gives them the chance to work at their pace with their groups, kind of when they want. And as a teacher, you can set the boundaries for what you think is important. Like, you want to make sure that they're logging a certain amount of hours a week, and you can set those as part of your expectations on that first day. Then as we move through the week, the idea is that as teachers, we check in, whether that's asynchronously sort of with the individual groups in mini Zooms, or it could be that you're checking in just because you have access to whatever collaborative note-taking that they're doing. And so you can see the work on Tuesday and Wednesday of what they've been doing together to solve the task, right? And so the more open-ended the task, obviously the more space they have to explore. And if we have time, I have a couple of examples of how open-ended this could go and still be very focused on getting through an entire unit, making sure that we're still covering all the content we need to be covering. And along the way, you could be using some of the tools that Kathleen suggested earlier to check in, to monitor both procedural and conceptual understanding, but also confusion. Or if students have sort of feel like they've solved something, then you have the opportunity later in the week to add extension problems, to ask them to go deeper, maybe try alternate strategies. And this is where, again, we're thinking about the slowing down of facilitation across a week. So you might think about mixing up the groups on Wednesday or Thursday based on what strategies students did, so they can start to talk about alternate strategies together before finally coming back on Friday, synchronously again, for some sort of wrap up. And all along that, you're able to check in with students in real time or check in on your own time to see what they're doing and be extremely thoughtful in a way we just never have the opportunity to think about how you might want to sequence out their shares in that final discussion, or what are the parts that you know you need to slow down around, or that students are understanding, and we can speed it up and move on from particular areas. Kathleen, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. Like I said, Sarah is just, we work with her at Metamorphosis, and she just has such a hugely helpful approach to problem-based learning that I'm learning from personally. So yeah, I wanted to add a couple of things. One is that I think that this virtual, and I'll be quick, this virtual shift is another opportunity about it is that I think a lot of us have been noticing a trend in increased needs of support for students in the brick and mortar classroom. And I don't know, but it's just an idea that this could really help us either eliminate some of the issues because they can engage with this work however they want. They can run around the house in between classes. They can rewatch a video 3 times if they missed the lecture or missed a piece of the lecture. The second thing I wanted to add is that one thing I find in the brick and mortar classroom is that I'm constantly urging kids to explain their thinking, and sometimes they get a little tired of it or they don't see the need for it. And now it's actually much more built into our platform, because if they're trying to communicate to me or to their group, they can't just say something quickly in front of me or make a gesture or what. They have to either record it or record a video or put it on a shared history, like Sarah mentioned. One tool for that shared history that I found that I have not used in my class, but looks promising, is called Formative. And I think the website is goformative.com. And you can put in videos, you can put in websites, you can put in images, whatever. But I think that this is a way that their communication will naturally have to be more thoughtful, and they'll naturally on this platform have to explain their thinking in a way that we always are looking for as PBL teachers, and also is a part of the workforce they're going to be in. Lastly, I can't remember if Sarah mentioned this or not, but for the videos, the content that you're sharing one way should not ever be during synchronous class time. You should not be doing lectures with synchronous class time. The synchronous class time should be only for two-way conversation about content that was already viewed whenever they wanted in a video that was recorded. Okay, I think those are the major things. So for the last 15 minutes, or so. I wanted to do maybe 6 minutes on a conversation about apps and tools that I'll kind of facilitate, and then maybe another 6 minutes for Sarah to facilitate on not apps and tools, but more like the pedagogy and how we could restructure our approach to teaching this material. So Courtney let me know, Courtney's kind of like monitoring the trends in the chat, and she told me that a lot of people are asking about Notability on a laptop. So Notability on a laptop, I actually don't know. And what I'd like to do is see if anyone can raise their hand digitally. I'm not sure that that's gonna work here. I don't see a way that people can raise their, oh, Christina Sesman Buckley, can you, oh, good. Yeah,
I
go
did
ahead.
it under the participants. You can, there's a button where you can raise your hand.
Yeah, Christina, you should be unmuted now.
She is.
Oh, I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So does anybody here know about or have any experience with Notability on a laptop? You can digitally raise your hand. No. Okay. Christina, do you? No. Okay. That's fine. The next thing, so that's something we'll have to explore as we go. The next one, can you save a PearDeck and come back to it? Yeah, so there's a lot more features on PearDeck that you can actually have what are called takeaways. So when you end the presentation, you get a Google Drive, you get something saved in your Google Drive with all of what everybody wrote on their screens. And you can, I don't know everything about it, but there are really useful takeaways that the kids can then look back at what they originally put, and then next to an answer key, and then rework it, and you can make that some kind of assignment. But basically you have your Google Slides saved in your Google Drive like normal. Every time you start a PearDeck presentation and end a PearDeck presentation, you have the opportunity to name it and also save it, and there's all kinds of things you can do with it. I don't know everything. Okay, screen time. So let me see if I can quickly add a PearDeck slide in here and just see who knows that they have synchronous time every day, who gets it once a week, and let me see if I can do that. New prompt. Okay, so bear with me. I'm gonna do, let's do a quick temperature check. So I think everyone can see, yes, okay. So put your blue dot on the green arrow if you get it, if you're getting Synchro Time multiple times a week. Put your dot on the red arrow if you're getting Synchro Time once a week. So this is like a once a week to 5 times a week scale of the community. Okay, so that's just interesting about like all our different schools. So red is once a week. Oh, some people I think are even, they don't get any Synchro Time. They're beyond. And then a lot of people are in the 5 times a week. Sarah, would you like to speak to that, or actually, can we do that raised hands thing again? Does anybody want to speak to ideas they have on using Synchro Time? I call it Synchro Time. I made that up. Synchronous class time. Please raise your hand. Don't be shy. I think it's just one of those things that, you know, we're all struggling with. It's like, how do you differentiate? You know, it's the never ending question. Sarah, did you want to talk about, oh, Jay Peterson. Go ahead.
I would just, since no one was responding, I thought I would try to raise my hand. Anyway, so one thing that we have basically one synchronous time a week, and then the other time is going to be like office hours. So I'll be available, but kids don't have to show up. And I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm thinking that that time might be really useful. So it's just the kids who want to come with a particular question, who need more targeted help, will come at that time. So I'm hoping to, with the synchronous one, do as much like group work, problem-based work as possible, then give them some kind of more rote things to do for homework. And then like they can check in with me during the office hours time if they have specific questions.
Yeah, I agree. Sonia, Grace Church.
I have a question where like I really don't feel like I know what I'm doing, but I want to kind of throw it out to you or the group or anyone who has experience with this. Like I try to do a lot of math talk in my classroom, so things like number talks, and I'm trying to figure out how well that's gonna translate to something like Zoom. If anyone.
Can you clarify what are number talks?
So you might put a problem up and you solicit student strategies for how they would think about that problem. But as the teacher, you're just basically recording what they say and really trying to get them to come up with the explanations and share their thinking, rather than using it as a time to say, like, this is how you do it, or, this is the algorithm we want. You're really just trying to get them all to share their thinking, but it's deliberately, at least as I've done it, a whole class conversation.
Yeah, my first thought is to use the PearDeck to kind of gather what are kids thinking individually, and then solicit either live or in between that and the next synchronized time. Try to choose some of the kids' responses and just show theirs, and then say, what do you guys think about this? Let's have a conversation. Maybe there's some kind of raised hand option in the platform you're using to discuss. I don't have it all worked out, but my idea is that you can absolutely mimic that activity of number talk with a group discussion, building on each other's ideas, using you can, like I showed in the beginning, using your iPad live streamed onto their screen, record what kids are saying. That's my best idea.
And
Kathleen,
so Michael in the chat had a good suggestion also of having the students share their screens. So, and for number talks, like you were saying, it's really important. Like the whole point is that it's student driven, and like maybe trying these out as small groups rather than whole class. That might be more manageable on Zoom if you've got, if you're as the teacher trying to do these with a smaller set of students, you might be able to manage it with 6 or 8 students without muted mics, but a whole class is probably going to start to feel a little bit overwhelming because there's not really an ability to call on students in the same way as when we're face to face.
Yeah, and Sarah, could you, another one that Courtney said came up in the chat a lot is favorite resources to find rich tasks or problem-based questions. Could you speak a minute on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 of my favorite websites when I'm starting to think about developing a rich task, because keep in mind, right, a rich task for my students might not be a rich task for my next set of students. Like they're very focused on who are my students, what are they learning. So I like to go to ucubed.org, which is Joe Bowler's site, and I'll throw that in the chat. I find that her starting tasks are very open-ended in a way that we can start really thinking deeply about how to shift a task for it to be a third grade task all the way up to, you know, a senior level task. Another website that I like is Enrich, and I'll also put that in the chat.
I'm putting these on everyone's screen.
Enrich, so N like Nancy and then RICH.maths.org. They're in the chat. Both of these websites I think are really, they're very thoughtful in designing their tasks from the perspective of rich tasks. So you can even go in and do a little digging in the Enrich site and see how they define rich tasks. And so what's going to show up on their website is in line with that. And you can see at the top here, they've got tabs for students, tabs for teachers, and I find this to be a very, very helpful website. It's also a place that I often will go to look for tasks for students when we're thinking about students who maybe are struggling with concepts. Rather than doing more rote skill and drill, I'll often find a task on here that embedded in that is the content that they might be struggling with, and allow them to explore it in a way that doesn't feel like it's just more practice. And so that's another reason I really like Enrich. I wanted to just share my screen really quickly, Kathleen, if that's possible. Just to show you a task that this was also came up in the chat that could work for what we were talking about earlier in that framework. So this is a very basic image. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a very basic image, and I did something similar to this at Town not very long ago. I showed the students these 3 images, and then we did the routines of what do you notice, and then what could the question be. So rather than asking them to solve a particular question, I just asked them, what do you notice? And they started to name the obvious, like there's sports equipment, there's kids' names, there's dollar signs. And then I asked them, you know, what kinds of questions do you think we could ask that are mathematically solvable? And if I invite you to explore this task as a learner yourself, and I think what you'll find is that kids as young as 3rd and 4th grade can use a task like this to start thinking about creating bar charts and starting to think about relationships. And students all the way into high school can start to use this kind of a task to explore systems of equations and graphing and what intersection points on graphs mean. And then we could complicate this problem even more because there are particular strategies that work for this image that do not work for this second image. And so this is like an extension problem. It looks very similar. It's about weights instead of money, but otherwise it looks very similar. But students discover that strategies from the first image do not work for strategies for the second image. And this is an invitation for students who might be very quick to write equations, for example, versus think about relationships and building new diagrams, to explore other strategies. So I'm happy, I realize that we're basically out of time, but I'm happy to talk further at another time, or if you want to email me with questions to go into these tasks specifically.